Good evening, YouTube. How you doing? It's Jesse again. I'm going to give you a little video on a Ford F150 fuel pump, 1992. I'm in the middle of replacing my fuel pump, and I just wanted to share my experience with you so you can work on yours and understand the wiring and understand what the fuel pump does and some of the problems that might come from your fuel pump if it goes bad. So anyways, I'm going to turn this around and I'll show you my fuel pump, and I'm going to show you the truck and how I did it. Okay, here's the old fuel pump, just for basically for reference. I'm going to show you what I've done and how you can deal with your fuel pump on your F-150. All right, here's the F-150 I have. It's a flare side. It's got the dual tanks. It's got the 302. But for the most part, if you have a rear and center fuel tank, you're going to run into the same or similar issues as I did. So just for reference, I have a new float here, a new sender, just so you can see how this works and how it operates. I did not replace mine. I used the OEM one. This, I believe, is a Herco or Urco. It's a Chinese-made one, but it works, and I'll show you how it works, and so you can figure things out when you are changing your pump. With a newer pump, if you're going to go to a Ford OEM pump, Ford does not make these connectors anymore, which are over here. Okay, these are the old style connectors, and I believe they stopped making these connectors 1993, I believe was the last year, or 1994. And these connectors gave way to the new connector, and here's the new connector right here. This is a newer connector, and if you get a new pump, which is still an OEM pump, you're going to have to actually solder this connector in on your harness so that the new pump will work. So without further ado, let me go to the new pump here so you can see the new pump. So the new pump, as you can see, is pretty much the same. You have the ring, and I have a brand new gasket here, but I used the OEM ring. I tend to use the OEM parts is because, you know, anything from China generally isn't that good. I prefer to use OEM parts as much as possible. And as you can see, you have the upgraded, this is a little bit dirty, but an upgraded connector here. And as you can see, it's got the Ford part number on it. Again, I'm not going to use anything but Ford parts. They tend to last a long time, and the only reason why I'm changing this is not that the pump is completely bad, but there are a few things that do go bad. I'm going to just kind of point those out to you. So when taking this off, obviously the car has 105,000 miles, which isn't that many, but the car's in very good shape, or the truck's in great shape, and it wasn't very rusty. So taking the tank down was not very difficult. However, the two steel braided cables or steel braided lines on top were quite difficult to take off, and even having the tool, I could not take off the larger one. It got stuck in a pickle, and I didn't know how I was going to get it out. Some people use dental picks, but I don't like to ruin the original connectors, and a dental pick could ruin the connector, so I did not want to do that. So I did not. So as you can see here, I have some of these fuel injector lines, and this one happens to be a 3/8, the one that was very difficult, but it didn't come out. But in a pinch, what you can do, just so you know, is if you have a Dremel tool, you could take essentially a hose connector or a hose, hose connector, and what you do is you cut it down, and you basically make it the size of the actual thing here, and you fit it over, and then you push it in there. So unlike the plastic kind of gives away, right? The metal does not. So as you push it in there, it truly gets those tangs, and it releases those tangs so you can actually get that off. So that's a quick trick. If you don't have the tools, and you don't have a metal tool, and you only have plastic ones and they don't work, if you cut a little hose connector down, you can actually put that in there, and it'll come off in a really simple. All right, so back to the pump here. So I have the pump here. I'm going to test its capability here, just so that you know, if you ever have to test the actual fuel sending unit, All right, the fuel sending unit works as such. Obviously, it goes up and down. There's a little resistor inside that changes resistance, which then sends a signal to your gauge inside the vehicle. So if you were to test the vehicle, right now I have it hooked up here with an ohm meter, and you can see right now it's acting as an open, but essentially if I do this right here and put this to ground, it's going to go to about 15 ohms, okay, when it settles down. It's right around 15 ohms. And if I compare that to the OEM one, it's actually right around 15 ohms. Not bad at all. So this one seems to be pretty good. So it goes all the way up. If I moved it, I'm going to move it all the way up. And I'll put this back to ground. And you'll see that it's somewhere around 175 to 180 as it moves up. Let's see if I can get this over here. Yeah, it's about 170 when it's full. Okay, so that's in its full state. It's at 170 ohms. There's a little bit more resistance, and the signal will go up. So if you want to check that, all right, you want to be at about 15 ohms at a dead empty, okay, all right, and about 170 to 180 at a full. So if you want to see if it's working properly, obviously you'll subtract. If you want to say 170, you'll be around 80 or 90 in the middle, plus the 15. So you'll be about 90 ohms, 85 ohms, half tank. So you can see if you got any flat spots in your sender. It's a quick way of checking before you actually put this thing back in if you wanted to replace it or not. Also, you can kind of take it apart and clean it. You can use an eraser. You can kind of clean it off with some kind of cleaner. But if the contact is wearing on the inside, it's tough. It's because what happens is the flat spots will end up showing in the future, and you'll probably end up replacing it. If you went with a Ford unit, the Ford unit is $120. Now, I just bought this unit just for testing, and actually my father has a Bronco, and I was just going to gift it to him and just say, here, I'll replace it for you. It's not a big deal. Doesn't take very long to actually replace this if you got the pump out, and the Bronco is actually a little bit easier to pull the tank out. So, all right, so here's the pump. So what went wrong with this pump? Okay, I don't have the filter on it. I emptied out the gas. If you're going to empty out the gas, don't do it on the grass, all right? Don't do it in your lawn. Have a container such as this, and then you just basically pour it in, pour it in a container and bring it to your local dump or something for hazardous waste. All right, so the pump actually pumped, okay? So the issue with the vehicle was I would have to turn the pump on 2 to 3 times so the pressure would build up in order for me to actually start the vehicle, and I wouldn't have long start. I would have long starts. So I decided to change out the front pump. Additionally, inside the pump, there's a check valve, and that check valve prevents gas from the rear tank from going inside the actual front tank. So if you're having a problem with gas going to the front tank on one of these, and you don't have a switch, some Fords had a switch, the diesels did, and I think some gases, the earlier ones, had switches on the body frame, then what happens is it's a check valve that's going bad in your pump. So makes sense. This is because if the check valve is bad, what's going to happen is the gas is going to go fall all the way back into the tank. So when you try to start it, you're going to have long starts. So if the check valve is working, well, guess what? You wouldn't have no problem. The gas would be there, the pressure would still be there, and it would slowly leak down, but it wouldn't leak down almost immediately. And this is what was my problem. It was leaking down almost immediately, so therefore I was having a fuel pump issue, and it was a long start issue. So I went ahead and got myself a new pump. I'm going to replace it, and now I have to deal with the wiring. So here's the deal with the wiring. Okay, you can buy an OEM kit, which I did. I bought an OEM kit from Ford, and if you have it, this is what you're looking at right here. Okay, you're looking at this connector right here. I have the box. Where is the box? If you don't know it, here is. Okay, the box is right here. It's from Ford Motor Company. You can get them from different companies, but I would recommend using the Ford, is because essentially, if you have to go through another pump, you'll get this type of connector, and there's no sense in rewiring this multiple times. So if you need a part number for that, here is the part number for that. It is F6PZ9A213BA. This wiring assembly is for
ensure that the tanks are correct for your pump. As you can see, this is a black connector, and I had a gray connector.
I bought this
The gray
on eBay,
connector was the
come with it.
proper
So now I had to do a
connector for
little
my
bit of
pump.
research.
Although the
On
wiring
how
is the
to wire
same,
this up.
the tanks are
Sometimes,
not.
people wire up incorrectly, and then the pump won't work, or something will go wrong. So I'm going to give you the proper way, because I haven't seen one on YouTube, on how to properly wire this up and not mess it up. So to give it a little bit more background, I noticed this after I took the pump off. I kind of pulled back the sleeve, and there you go. You got it. Looks like it was almost a couple bumps away from actually going out on me as far as having no fuel pump. So I was kind of lucky. Even though this is just the ground, it's the ground for the motor, and if I didn't have any power to the motor, then I would have been stuck, because the back pump was wasn't doing nothing but feeding the front pump. So, all right, without further ado, here's your connector on top. Your connector is the older style connector. Those were from like 87 through, I think it was 93 is the last year that they made this connector. So this connector has a black, you have the blue, yellow, you have the red, and then you have the orange. Okay, the orange wire is a ground wire, okay? That's the ground wire for the motor. The red wire is the actual motor for the power for the motor, all right, for the pump. And then you have the blue wire, which is actually the signal wire for the fuel sender. And then you have the black wire, which is an additional ground. So let's flip it over so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, all right? There's actually only three tanks here, okay? And you can see the brass right here. That just serves as an additional ground for this whole motor or pump itself, okay? This right here is the sender, which is the yellow piece right here that would actually go in here, okay? When you actually put this together, if you buy a new one, you'll actually have to wrap it around this right here, and then you'll have to put that on here just to make sure that your pump and your sender will work. All right. So the middle one of the two is the fuel pump, right? This is the red wire, and you can see it corresponds over here with the red wire here for the pump, right? And then of course the ground is at the end. All right. Now I verified that this is a ground wire, okay? This is the power wire, this is another ground wire, and this is feed wire. I've actually verified that online, and I've looked at wiring diagrams on actual Ford wiring diagrams, so that is correct. So I hope that I can help you guys figure out the wiring, so therefore you don't have any issues when you go to solder this on. So how does this go? Okay, these are completely different, right? Obviously. All right, so just so that you know, the ground wire remains the ground wire, okay? Now, the ground wire you would think goes to this one, when in fact it doesn't go to that one. This is actually the fuel pump ground wire, which goes to the orange, okay? The pink wire goes to the red wire, okay? The pink wire goes to the red wire, then the yellow wire goes to the blue and yellow wire, and then the gray and red wire, which is the second ground, goes to this black wire. So this is how it would go, just like this. If I were to lay it down straight like this, you have the ground. Okay, you have the power for the pump, then you have the sending motor, and then on the last but not least, you have the final ground, all right? So I hope this helped you in putting your fuel pump together on your F150 302 or 6-cylinder or a 351. They all are pretty much the same. The old connector needs to get changed out to a newer connector. That is the wiring setup for the new connector. If you decide, you can go ahead and buy a new pump and replace that pump, all right? And that will alleviate most of your problems. Typically, these pieces don't go bad, especially if you're in the southern states. If you're up north in New York, you're probably in sad shape. Okay, Connecticut, New York, New Hampshire, these things are probably gone, and you end up having to buy a whole new unit, and then you can't really get away with replacing the pump. But there's really not much to this, other than obviously you have the pump in the center, and if you wanted to replace this pump, you could take this pump off, and what you have right here is that little tang right here. You have to lift that up, and then you have to pry it out of here, okay? And then you'll snip these wires, okay? And then a new pump will come with the wires, and then you'll just have to solder in those wires right there, so you can get the new pump wired in. Now, if you're lucky, you might be able to find a factory fuel pump. Typically, you can't find any more, but is the part number if you have a 1992 302 Ford tank. Okay, that was the midship tank. It's steel. That would be the part number. It's FOTU 98263CA. That is the part number if you're looking for a fuel pump for a 1992 F150 302 midship steel tank. Okay, so I hope I helped you. If I did help you in this, give me a thumbs up. I'm not going to show you how to put the tank in because the tank is pretty much self-explanatory. You just have two straps. They go in there. Obviously, you have the fuel, the fuel hose that has to get clamped on there. I didn't take this one off. If you're taking it from the bottom, you have to take that off. You just have to take the fuel hose clamp off over there, and then you just pry it off and it comes off. Just do the reverse when you put it back on. It's not that difficult, okay? So, if there's any questions, let me know. I will be happy to help you. You guys have a great day, and good luck. Last tech tip here, before I leave you. They give you 4 pieces of heat shrink, and it's very important. The reason why they give you 4 pieces of heat shrink is because they expect you to solder these ends on, okay? A lot of people use crimp connectors, but what happens to crimp connectors over the course of time is that they get corroded, they get loose, and then the wires disconnect, and then they'll give you the no fuel pump action that you're not wanting, okay? So if you're to do the job right, you want to solder these connectors in and then use the heat shrink over them to prevent any problems in the future. All right, guys, take care.